Hey, Mark, how we doing?
Alex did a webinar this week with Huntress, and they have created an assessment that they have said that we could share in the platform. And so Alex is going to pull that up, or I am. We can race.
I got it. All right. So if you go into the assessments tab and
you're
manage...
only showing your Jamboard screen.
Oh, again, how about now? There we go.
I'm still
seeing Jamboard.
Oh, I'm not smart enough to operate so now I paused the screen share and I'm switching it and it's not going anywhere. All right, so if you go into assessments on the left and go into manage assessment templates, you guys should see a new template for download. Pay no attention to all the junk that's in my demo environment, but what you're going to see here is the Huntress related assessment items. If you drill into this particular items or these particular items, you'll see persistence, threat hunting, ransomware canaries, external recon, endpoint detection and response, and a cyber liability question that actually doesn't have anything to do with Huntress, except it happened to be the topic of the webinar we were doing with them. But if you import this template, you'll get those questions and you'll be able to add them to your existing templates. So what that looks like for you guys is come out here, click the download button over here on the right, and go ahead and import that template. Then the items will show up under manage assessment items here, and you'll be able to import them into any existing template that you have. So if you go into your existing template, you can literally go into your existing template. You can click on add an item, add an existing item, and just slide those Huntress questions right into cybersecurity or whatever section is in your risk assessment where they belong. Is everybody comfortable walking through that?
Nope.
I thought I heard a nope.
No.
That's what I thought I heard, which is background noise. But
I didn't say no.
Oh, okay.
If you need a hand doing it, don't hesitate to reach out to us, or there's some good conversation going on in the Slack channel these days too. So that is, whose Slack is that? That is MSP Geek Slack, or just ping one of us and we'll hop on with you. Our support guys will hop on and help you through it. But know that if you re-import those questions, and all of those questions have different names than the ones that we've used in other templates, so they should import okay. They shouldn't give any trouble. But if you have any problems with them, reach out to us. You guys know by now, our support is not to be trifled with. They will get you solved with a quickness. So with that, if there's no questions on that, I think those are some pretty good questions. So how many Huntress users do we have in here? Anybody? All right, so Huntress partners, go check those out. Those are the questions that Huntress thinks you should be asking with relation to their products and services.
I will post the Slack channel, Alex, so you can keep.
Yeah, actually, they're moving it to Discord. We should give them the Discord invite. I don't know how much longer.
It's like, well, criminy. I know where the Slack invite is. Let me mute and I'll go poke around Discord for a minute.
I can grab it real quick. Yeah, there is still a Slack channel for this, but MSP Geek is moving mostly to Discord.
Oh, I will link the Huntress recording to. They have it. I'll go see if I can.
Yeah, I don't know that we've gotten the Huntress recording yet.
I've not gotten it yet, but let me go request it from them.
So when
I have the
I
have the Discord link. Did you guys find it?
Yep, I just threw it out there.
Okay.
Perfect. If you guys don't spend any time in MSP Geek, there's a lot of stuff out there, but one of the channels is a Lifecycle Insights channel, so you can hang out there and chat with us, as well as a lot of your other favorite vendors. If you're having trouble with guys like ConnectWise or Autotask or any of them, a lot of them spend some time out there, even to the point of like ConnectWise's CEO spending some time out there. So you can definitely get some attention to your issues if you've got any. So you guys should see a kind of a PowerPoint in progress here. And Marnie and I have been just putting ideas together based on our conversation from last week. We'd really like for everybody to kind of hop off mute and have a real conversation with us this week around some of this, because the topic kind of surfaced last week that it's really hard to do business reviews for your small clients. You get to a point where it just doesn't make sense. But then we also kind of forked into, is there an opportunity to use some of the things that we present in business reviews as a differentiator to show to even to a prospect. So we got to kind of talking about, is there an opportunity to run some workshops? Is there an opportunity to actually get customers together and do some things in groups that might supersede or even add more value than trying to do a single QBR for a single customer, especially when you're talking about those customers that are spending $500, $600 a month, and you don't want to find the time to give them a quarterly business review every quarter. So we just kind of thought through some areas of opportunity. One of those is prospecting. I think there's an opportunity, and just kind of thinking through it. My thought was taking a risk assessment and printing it without any answers, and literally talking a customer through maybe the cybersecurity risk insurance one, and talking a group of customers through, these are the things that insurance companies are looking for, and you should be, and this is what it means in English, right? Because most of your customers don't understand what good looks like. They don't know the English translation of even what some of our assessments that we've tried to bring down to English, what some of that means. You could do the same with your very small clients, your very small and medium businesses, the 3, 4, 5 person customers, and kind of have the same conversation with them. But if you're doing it one to many, I think there's an opportunity there where you're not spending so much time, that it's a loss, really. I mean, when we sit and do the math, there's only so many of these you can do by the time you're not making money on those contracts. Jeff said he's working with a client who provides cyber insurance. So Jeff, are they working with you to deliver some content? Are you going to work with them to deliver our content? What's the plan?
It's getting the ball started. It's both good for them and good for their clients. They all get the questionnaires from their internal partners and so on. Say, hey, do you have this? Do you have this? Do you have this? Well, yes, we do. And here's what it means. And here's how we protect against those things. And by the way, here they're bringing their own clients in who've got interest or should be having the cyber insurance anyway.
Nice.
So we tie with that and our partners on the core security side and the SOC as a service as well. So
awesome.
I think that if it's a partnership to cut the costs out, I mean, it's a little bit of investment on both sides. Hey, you provide the launch, we'll provide the content, a little give and take. But in the long term, you're going to be able to weed out and possibly MSP in a box. Here's the cookie cutter plan. Here's the basics. Let's do our basic all over and core security. Boom.
And it's
ready to go.
It's an unoffensive way to sit down with some folks who maybe don't know you and kind of explain how far off they really are from best practices. And I really like that. Mm-hmm. If you have an opportunity and don't have an insurance carrier local that you work with, I'm sure if you reached out to Fifth Wall, they would work on doing something virtually with you if they're not in the right area. But they're great humans.
Many times, like a chamber of commerce will, say, hey, you get a chance to present at either a breakfast meeting or a weekly function. Say, hey, we'll give you a presenting sponsor. Cast the net wide. It's sales game. It's law of large numbers. I talk to 10 prospects, I'll get one good lead. So give me 20 to 30 people. I'll take 3 leads.
Right. No, I like that. I like that a lot. And really, once you get done with that cybersecurity assessment or that insurance questionnaire or whatever, and you could even have people bring their own if they're getting them already. Once you get through with that, the answer to all of those is come sign up for my services. The products, the solution that you guys offer really is the thing that plugs all the gaps. So it was an interesting concept. Knowing that most really small businesses, the folks who are going to show up for something like this, or maybe even some medium-sized businesses, and I think probably even some healthcare and some other folks who have compliance obligations, are going to show up to these things and not have all their ducks in a row. And Jeff, have you thought about doing this as a series where you just continue to try and move the needle a little bit every couple of weeks or every couple of months, or quarterly workshops or anything like that?
No, not yet. That would be, phase 2, the ongoing, but, let's see if this gets off the ground, if we get some traction with it. Like with anything, if it gains ground and creates good quality leads, okay, we can expand.
Right.
I mean, also it may also, go to some of our, we do little web blogs that we put on the website.
I was just
Perfect.
thinking that if you take the time to build consumable content for really small businesses, it also makes for great marketing material because
Mhm.
you've had to
Yes.
really consolidate it and condense it down to a single message, and you have to simplify the message. So I think it's power packed in addition to driving prospect conversation.
Mhm.
I like that. I like that a lot. Um,
So Alex, I don't know if you saw it, Tim joined. Tim, I'm curious, you mentioned last week that you did small biz thoughts. Was that a prospecting conversation, or should we do that when we're talking about existing client piece?
Prospecting.
Prospecting, do you want to chat about that?
Sure. So I don't have any slides, but that's okay. So we
What?
leverage.
No slides? People love
I-
slides, Tim.
yeah.
I know. If I just realized I had my video on as I'm sitting on the back deck watching. Anyways,
Nice rock.
so what we do is leverage the multiple Facebook groups that I've built here in New Hampshire and New England. We have 5 different groups kind of targeting 5 different regions of just New Hampshire as well as New England as a whole. And roughly 10,000 or so members across all of them. And I haven't done this in a little while because I don't have a salesperson anymore. That's different. But what we do is in any one of the groups, we create what we've called small business spotlight, and we kind of promote that a little bit in the group. And generally what happens is somebody in that group was like, I'd love to be a spotlight. So we schedule time with that business and do a whole 1-hour webinar where I have a series of questions that I ask them during that webinar about their business and get them to talk about their business live streamed in the group, as well as YouTube or wherever else your platforms can live stream to, and basically get somebody or get a business to not only talk about their business, but the challenges that they face and how and when and where appropriate technology or QBRs or cybersecurity, the things that we as MSPs do, not like try to tie that into the conversation around risk, around business continuity, around the things that matter to them as business owners.
And do you make a preemptive strike on what those questions will be? And one of my thoughts is
We do.
A lot of the podcasts that Alex and I join will send over a framework that basically is
Yeah.
plug and play,
Yep.
like send over your name
Yep.
and your headshot, and here are 3 questions you're going to answer, and what 4 questions would you like me to
Yep.
ask you, kind of thing.
Yes. So Marnie, you're familiar with what I do with my compliance risk
Yep.
peer group. And
Yep.
what we do there is here. So once I get somebody, engaged on the Facebook group that's willing and wanting to do this, I literally send them the link to my website where they fill out
That form.
all of the information. They have the preloaded questions. Maybe they have a PowerPoint, like they have a form on my website that I could share with you all that basically is like, great, let's book it. Here's the time. And then I promote it after that on their behalf.
Yeah, I think.
And they're promoting it too. So I have a process in place to manage all that. Yep.
Yeah, that's because again, if we're talking about the littles, right, you don't want to
Yep.
spend a ton of time. So that's a good way. It reminds me of, I know Kirk's not on this call, but he's talked about it on this call, so I'm sure he wouldn't mind me bringing it up. He did a stop, drop, and roll.
Yeah.
Cybersecurity that he did with a bank and an insurance agent. So I feel like it's a combo platter of what Jeff was talking about and what Tim's talking about. They all did a webinar, and I feel like there were 25 to 50 people on. I joined to listen to see how they were having the conversation, and they all talked about what happens in the case of an attack. I think a ransomware attack is what they were talking about. But he talked about those 3 steps, and each of the other businesses got to share how they fit into the story. So I think it was probably good prospecting for all 3 of those.
Yeah.
And so obviously when you're getting a business owner to talk about their business is going to benefit like everybody loves talking about themselves. And so that gets the engagement from the business. But what happens with the other like-minded businesses is that they begin to learn the similar risks that they face
Yeah.
from a peer, right? From somebody that's
That's what
doing
Jeff
like,
just put in the chat, right? If you say it,
Oh,
everyone
sorry.
questions it. If another business owner, the same, you know, of the same
Mhm.
vertical says it, then suddenly it's
Mhm.
gospel truth.
Mhm.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so I'd be happy to dig into that more details down the road if you'd like.
Yeah, no, I think that was great. That was, you had mentioned it last week and I wasn't sure if it was prospecting or, yeah, Bob, sorry, Betsy, we can do that. Along the same lines, I had mentioned coffee talk. So if you figure really small businesses, sometimes, they can't pull away from the business day for very long, very often, right? So, I used to do coffee talks that were 25 minutes, and boy, was I strict on that time frame, where it was just an education session. I would actually build marketing content around whatever I was going to do, and kind of advertise that I was going to do this. And it was, again, bring your own coffee. It's a virtual thing, join a coffee talk, but it made for bite-sized pieces that were education, and with some fun marketing around it. It can kind of become a thing. But I did that before hours, right? So at 7:30 in the morning or whatever, and then would record it.
Were you doing that with customers or with prospects, or both?
So I've done it with customers, and then I did it internally in my company, actually, the really big company with the internal sales team. But I did it with customers that worked in school systems where they didn't have time during the day. So I would do a coffee talk with them before
Try and
school.
squeeze it in.
Yeah.
So that kind of takes me to the experience that you and I have had. And so Marty and I have been traveling the country, but we've done now 3 pre-day events with the 7-figure MSP group. And those all turn into, they're all meant to be educational and not sales pitchy. So there's no sales pitch, literally none. But they turn into almost a workshop event. And the first one that we did, the language was a make and take workshop. So the goal was, you come here, you get a workbook, you fill something out, and you walk home with something that you can actually take into your business and start to deploy and start to work and start to use. And I wonder how much of a workbook or something like that we could help MSPs kind of put together a template for. And if you did this, you could have a mix of your existing clients and and prospects. Your existing small clients can get a lifecycle insights output from their their actual data. There might be some things for a small client that you don't meet with all the time that you just can't answer the questions. So some of them are marked unknown. But the customer can come back and say, well, actually, I don't have an electronic funds transfer policy that's less than 12 months old. We've never reviewed it since we wrote it. So they might be able to come back in and fill in some of those questions. But, it just strikes me as maybe some opportunity there. Does anybody have some thoughts on that? Like, I always feel like when I go somewhere and come home with a workbook, I never throw the workbooks away, for starters. I've been cleaning my office and I have workbooks.
That's why books are better than business cards. We talked about that on the book bunch.
I have
webinar.
workbooks from IT Nation.
Look, Bob's got his right there.
Yeah.
That last one looks familiar. I think that's the last 7-figure one, Bob.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There you go.
Just a thought is that there's both good and bad points to giving it out at the beginning or waiting until the end. Go home and do your homework, because they're going to be fidgeting with it during the presentation.
Oh, now as a teacher, I can tell you better time handing out your worksheets well, because as soon as you put them in your hands, they're right. It's completely distracted. Now, if you work them through it, you can usually get them back. But if you're thinking it's going to be their homework, don't hand it out until you're ready, because that's 10 minutes you're not going to get back.
But if you're going through it, if you're going through it page by page, right? If you're going through it page by page, you can kind of reel them back in. And that's the experience that we've had at some of these events. I mean, we literally at the last one saw all the MSPs reach up and close their laptop lids and get out their pencil and paper and start writing. I mean, usually in these rooms, there's 75 or 80 people. Usually there's 55 laptops running.
Mhm.
And I would bet that during the last exercise we did, there weren't 10.
And part of that, I'm going to get super teachery for a sec, is to make it fill in the blank, right? So a lot of folks, when they say it's an educational workshop, they feel the need to put all the content in. As a matter of fact, when Alex and I were first preparing for Build It, we had all of the content in the workbook, but we realized nobody needed to come to our session because the content was already there. So when we peeled it out and made the workbook have questions that we were going to answer in there, it was more marketing, right? So even if they did walk away with your workbook or get a copy of it and you weren't there, you've asked questions that if they want to know the answer to, they know who to come, who to come back to. Alex, I was thinking about talking kind of like the sticker chart paper activity that we did too, just for some strategies on what to do if you're in the room with folks.
Yeah, that was a cool exercise. I don't know how it applies to these guys, right?
Well, I don't know that activity necessarily does, but I think the notion of getting people to get up and engage, because to Jeff's point, as soon as you put something in front of them, they're going to read it at their desks.
Yeah.
But if you had, so they call this the 4 corners in a shocking turn of events. If you're in a room, you assign each corner a topic. And if you're in a room of 25 business owners, go stand in that corner if the fear of a ransomware attack keeps you up at night. Go stand in that corner if you're not sure your employees are actually working all day long. Go stand in that corner if you're worried about how to grow more business this year, and go stand in that corner if you wish technology could help make you more profitable. And so then they're self-selecting topics they want to discuss. They can come to the group with questions, all of which, to Tim's point, get solved with technology. But getting them to talk with each other is I think a valuable piece in those workshops.
Well, it takes away some of the, I'm up here to lecture to you.
Yeah.
And turns it into a group exercise with thought leaders.
Yep.
So I'm not sure the intent here, but as you guys were talking, I was thinking about, the way I look at, the way I would look at this for me is that I would love to talk about, I think we've done a good job as an industry to kind of say, we take care of your technology, get back to work, and we've got you, right? And it's on us. The problem with that in this day and age, that worked years ago when cyber threats weren't a thing. And, but now we really need them to step up, sit down with us. And part of the problem is getting them in the room together to talk about, business reviews and stuff like that. I think this might be a great way to position yourself like in a public speaking event, saying, let's listen, these are the discussions you should be having with your current IT provider, and using your product as a wedge, right? A wedge to say, these are the questions you should be asking. These are the things that they should be coming to you about. And then say, if you want a list, feel free to give me your business card and I'll email it to you, or submit your address to this web form, this landing page, whatever. And potentially maybe even give them create a demo login for Lifecycle Insights where they can just kind of tool around themselves, give us a demo of our configuration of your product so they can see the assessments. So they can just dabble around and then have a lead magnet on a lead gen form on there. Say, listen, if you want to schedule a meeting to talk about how we engage more deeply with our clients and most IT providers, submit this and we'll reach out to you.
Well, I think it's an interesting point that you make, that we did a good job of saying, hands off, we'll take it from here.
Yep.
And then literally the goalpost moved, and we didn't do a good job of going back and communicating that. It's funny you mentioned the things your IT provider should be doing for you, because I did this webinar for a partner, and we literally talked about 5 things your IT service provider should be doing. We did the webinar for his prospects, and now they're using cuts of it. When their sales guy goes out and meets with somebody and they have a question, they literally go send them after the fact one of the cuts of Jason and I talking about these kind of topics. We went through budget forecasting and risk analysis, vendor risk analysis, vendor due diligence, business impact analysis, and DR and IR planning. And Jason's a pretty mature MSP. These are things he can do. These are things that he's really good at. So they were real differentiators for him. but that's really great content, and they've had a ton of luck with it. Like they've done really well with this content. So that one's kind of an interesting one.
And there's probably the aspect of it is to say, listen, and you could even lead with the IT industry has set this mindset with you that leave the technology to them and they've got this. And this is no longer the way you should be thinking, and explain to them why that is. And you could approach this two ways, right? One, what they're not doing for you, or two, what you should be asking your IT provider, depending on the audience, right? You can go from two different directions. But for me, I'm not a big fan of like talking about cybersecurity gaps and all that stuff. Like that's not great material from a speaking standpoint, unless, you know, people kind of they have to do it, but they don't want to do it. But this makes them feel like they're missing something, right? And they're going to dig in a little bit, I think, to really, you know, understand exactly, you know, what they may be missing with their current engagement with their IT provider.
Yeah, this is not your grandmother's managed service offering.
Yeah.
You know, one of the other things that we just kind of were kicking around as we talked through this was having quarterly topics. And I don't know if this goes to you know, quarterly getting all of those small clients, your five users and 6 users and little tiny clients, and getting them together quarterly to do an exercise or to do a focus session, where you take something like technology budgeting, if you're not going to do it all for them, have them go focus on that. Disaster recovery, or, you know, whatever cyber insurance, asset end of life, all of those things. If there's is anybody successfully doing something where you go on a marketing blitz for a quarter, and is there a transition to take that to a one-to-many opportunity where you could invite your small customers and some prospects who are working with another MSP?
We don't, but you know, you bringing this up makes me think, for the clients that don't want to get in a room with you alone, saying we're doing a kind of lunch with other business owners to discuss the things that you should be thinking about in your business. And even if it was generalized, it'd be great.
Yeah, we talked about this last week. We were poking a little bit of fun at Carl Bickmore, and I love Carl, but he says my customers used to call me $2 Carl, because every time I showed up, they knew I wanted to sell them something. It was $2 for antivirus and $2 for this and $2 for that. And if you have customers who are a little jaded because they feel like every time you show up, you want to sell them something, I think you're right. I think it's a good opportunity to get them in front of you. Marnie and I even talked about you guys giving away like a planner, you know, the actual planner books. And believe me, some of your customers still write stuff down on paper, right? But, you know, if you gave them a planner that every month had an IT task that they should do, right? Review policy and procedure around this.
It's password month, people.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah.
let's last pass this month.
Right.
Are we turning into accountants where we give you like the schedule when your taxes are due each year and stuff like that? Is that what we're doing?
I think we're going to meet accountants in the middle somewhere, to be honest. I think accountants are going to start doing managed services, and we're going to meet them in the middle with some of the calendar and scheduler and some of the stuff that they do. Is there a downside to that?
With their top 4 does that.
Who does?
Withum, WITHUM, they're
Okay.
doing technology services. They're big, really big.
I know some accountants that do technology services, but that's not what I meant. What I meant was business practice wise and business operations wise.
Yeah.
I know accountants who are starting to do flat fee accounting and, you know, one price covers it all kind of things. But I do think that as MSPs, when we struggle to deliver the whole message to our customer, right? It's hard to get them to see 47 things that are wrong and deal with them all at once. To give them bite-sized pieces might help to move the needle with some of these folks that struggle with it.
There's also some inertia from coming out of COVID, from my opinion. Like, I was on the road a lot. I take people to lunch all the time and they were happy to go. Now it's not so simple.
Yeah. This is true.
But that lunch and learn idea, when you have a group, to your point, AJ, right? They don't want to meet with you one-on-one.
Yeah.
Safety in numbers.
Is anybody going to local chamber events?
Chamber
Lunch and
events
learns?
now?
Has that stuff started to open back up? Since
I think they're open.
Since we work out of the spare bedroom, I don't really chamber of commerce much anymore.
Yeah, they're very active in Florida.
Good. Well, were they ever not active in Florida?
Yeah, pretty much. They've been active the whole time.
Right. The rest of the world may be a little different, but you know, they can,
It has been interesting here, the economic club here, where they went from in-person to virtual. And they started hosting both as they started getting back to it at different pricing. Now it's the same price whether you show up in person or local. It's interesting how that's evolving and how they're trying to maneuver that, getting people to come back or not come back.
yeah. Well, you know, the IT events in the space, we're seeing half of them, probably about half of them have red, yellow, and green wristbands you can put on. You know, red is like, stay away from me, I don't want to shake your hand. And green is, come on over here and give me a hug. And the rest of them are somewhere in between, you know. Everybody's trying to find a way to get back to normal.
So Alex, I don't know, I'll put in the chat, you know, creating a small local business group. It's also interesting to look at, so the local chambers have, to Tim's point, one of everybody, right? And if you're not the MSP in that group, you might get locked out. But there are also groups where maybe you could get a speaking session. So I'm thinking, Alex, how the 9 superintendents for the school system on the Eastern Shore have regularly scheduled meetings as a cohort. Frankly, that is how I ended up with my ed tech job, is I went and pitched to that group. Right now I was pitching ed tech services, but they also all need the same type of IT solutions. And there are groups like that where you can meet the CEOs of like-minded companies.
Delaware has a group of town managers that all meet once a month.
Yeah.
And literally the town manager for every town in Delaware is at lunch that day.
Yep.
And if you're willing to buy lunch, sometimes you can
I was
get.
gonna say, was that a sponsorship where you bought lunch? Yeah.
It wasn't an official sponsorship, but it was, somebody had to refer you in and bring you in. And then if you were willing to bribe your way into the meeting, you could get everybody's ear for 10 minutes.
Is anybody thinking of a specific vertical that's where all the small, really small businesses are? I'm just curious if there are specific, all the one-man shops are florists or dental offices.
I had some weird ones. Like one of ours was a painters. One of ours was a company who did they worked for the Recording Industry Artists Association as a contractor, and they did copyright search. So when like they went looking for, and they had this fancy database that they put all the material in that belonged to these copyrights, and then they had some fancy way to go back and search it. I don't even know what all it did. I gave them a terminal server, they loaded a SQL database and rocked and rolled, and there was a guy that maintained it for them. But it was an interesting, it was 2 people. That's all they did.
So Tim
there's
is
a lot of weird ones.
contractors. So my husband was a part of a group, and they would have rainy day events because those folks don't work on rainy days. So, I mean, he's a landscaper. They could, and that seems odd, but it was, right. You know, this is gonna, hey, it's the snowstorm's coming. Join us for this.
Yeah, I wonder if there's opportunity there, like there is the attorney who has himself
I
and
would
one
think
paralegal.
not. Yeah.
Or the bookkeeper who has himself, the accountant who has himself and a bookkeeper and a front office person. And I think there's a lot of those kind of professional services folks.
What about targeting franchises?
What's that?
What about targeting franchises? Because in effect, they're an association, right?
I was never able to crack open a franchise in my years, but that's not to say it can't be done.
So franchises, I tried. So the guy that started Planet Fitness, you've probably heard of that, went to school. His kids and our kids went to school. So I know him, like we hung out, we're personal. And I tried to like get their franchise business for technology, and they wanted nothing to do with it. In fact, when because he built franchises, he was a really good contact point for me to understand how can I get into the franchise business as an MSP? And he's like, don't even bother, because the end franchisee, the person that owns the physical building and all that, like doesn't want it, won't pay for it. Corporate's not going to pay for it. Like it's a very tough nut to crack.
So is that all franchisees are just running their own tech? Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Pretty much. So you're going to have 2 different models in the franchise space, right? And I also talked to another good friend who owns 7 Dunkin' Donuts, right? So the franchise model, as far as technology, you're going to be in one of 2 kinds of things. It's either all corporate run and mandated, good luck with that, or they're not doing anything tough luck, and the end franchise owner won't do anything. So that's basically the two kinds of, people, at least I found, because I was like, hey, I should go after like, I know the guy that founded Planet Fitness, that would be perfect. And he's like, don't bother. It's a complete waste unless you can find that, unicorn, which I've obviously not been able to find.
Yeah, I had interesting experiences with the Subway franchise next to my old store because I was in there all the time and I knew them. And once every couple of years, their POS was just down. It was just dead. And they called Subway franchise support, and they waited and they waited, and somebody FedExed them a new computer, and then they waited. And it was miserable. But they couldn't do anything about it because they were locked into having to deal with franchise.
Can you read Alex's comment? I like this idea and have some thoughts on it.
So we're talking about having a tech council where we have different reps from our clients meet in sort of customer success scenarios. They talk with us and use each other. They talk with us and each other about how we can help them move forward best. It's not in place yet, but we have some people that have agreed to be part of things. I like it. Is this designed to be?
I can expound on it a bit.
Yeah, I mean, are they coaching you, or are you coaching them, or what's the...
I kind of think, it's a little bit of a give and take. So we've thought about it. We do a huge practice with the legal field. So we have a lot of legal clients. So we've thought about it in two ways. One, those legal clients all have similar tech needs for the most part. So sometimes they just get, it's one of those, somebody said it earlier, if you say it, it doesn't matter. But if they hear like, oh, they're also doing that, that's a good idea, I should do that. Like, this is great. So it helps in that way. But the other side of it is, and it's because what I've been starting to try to focus on, and what I'm trying to kind of push us towards is focusing on business needs. So the truth is, as much as I work with lawyers all the time, which is a joy, as you know, probably, or maybe, I don't truthfully understand their business well enough sometimes. Like, I try to, but like, I'm not in it every day. Just like they don't understand my business, well enough. They kind of get, clearly we talk all the time, and they know I try to give them all these things, but they don't really understand it. So I think there's going to be a little bit of both about how we understand, in this case, how we understand the legal industry, and then how we can help that move forward. So, it's going to be, I think it's going to be give and take. I think that's why it's a council, and it's not, what can be scary is if positioned wrong, it could be a room where you're surrounded by your clients and they're pointing at you, or it can be a room where you're in the circle, you're on the outside of the circle with them, and you're all looking at each other at this table, and you're all going, hey, we all kind of do the same. We all are looking for the same goal. Our goal is to help you do better. Your goal is to do better. How do we do that together? And not just us, but clients.
Which, if you step back and look at it, that's really what this call's about, right? We spend some time trying to bring some best practices that we've begged, borrowed, or stolen from somebody else, or, on the rare occasion had a good idea on our own and brought it to the table, and share them with the community, right? We try and make sure that the community lifts each other up. We had, Greg and Matt and Tricia sit out here one day and talk about how they're using client goals to move the needle. And that wasn't our content. That was, somebody in the community is doing something cool, and everybody else can benefit from it. And we do our best to kind of sit on the outside and just throw some ideas out, let people talk about them, do those kind of things. Unless, of course, we're talking about, hey, here's a new feature, let's show us what we're rolling out, which we'll do that next week.
I was gonna say that's next week, so be sure to show
That's
up.
next week.
I think it creates a stickiness too, because suddenly not only are they a client and maybe a partner, but now they're a part of a community. And like I said, and the idea with that kind of that small business group, it's almost like we're creating, as Tim said, a BNI, and we're kind of, sponsoring / heading it. But at the same time, we're also just a member of it. So there's more to it. It puts you on a different level, I think, than the typical. As much as we try to be partners, I still think there's always that kind of that you're meeting on my side and my side, and this is completely separate. Because again, as you kind of, I think you mentioned earlier, Alex, like there's not necessarily going to be a sales pitch in any of these things. It's going to be just more a conversation. There could be if somebody wants there to be one, but there doesn't have to be.
Well, and I think you mentioned we think we have relationship, or we were trying to have relationships with our customers, but every last one of us bought a tool that the vendor told us, stay at home, you can do 85-95% of your service tickets without going to see your customer. You don't have to roll trucks, you don't have to see them anymore. And guess what? we lost our relationships with our customers. So this is actually going out and getting back in front of them and rebuilding that. And there's some value in that. I had better relationships with my customers when we were a break fix shop.
I
I made
think,
more money as a managed service provider, but I had better relationships the other way.
I think the interesting part of having folks all in the room together is you can also help prioritize as a group, right? So that when everybody's discussing what are your top priorities, it's very clear that 10 of 12 folks are all, you can kind of get folks down the same path so you can do more bulk work, right? If you have to go have one-on-one conversations with 12 folks, it's very easy to get 12 different priorities. But when you start leading that conversation and getting them all to participate together, you can get some kind of group think around prioritization that helps with this bulk conversation for really small businesses. Feels a little less one-off that way, I think.
Oh yeah, definitely. I agree.
It'll be interesting to see your progress. As
And
a-
Well,
I
yeah,
think-
we're moving forward on it. Oh, you know what? I'll also say too. Somebody mentioned this earlier. As far as like this could play into it. Again, I don't necessarily want it to be sales, but and this is actually kind of going to evolve as we continue to expand on the customer success module. I call the customer success module the shopping list for like our VCIO and things like that,
Yeah.
because as we have
I
that
like it.
standard, as we have that standard stack in there, you pull up the one list, it literally just shows you all the blanks, like where's the holes, and you can go by category or by client, and you can even do verticals if you wanted to create the groups, but you go by category and go like, wow, we got a lot of clients that really need an update on their firewalls or whatever the heck the thing might be, or like they're not using the right, wireless solution, whatever that might be. And then it's possible, I don't think at first, I think we would have to really ease into this, but this council might be a way to start pushing that forward with some of those people as well. Again, I don't want to make it a sales pitch. I think the first, I don't know if it would be a quarterly meeting or whatever it might look like. I think the first several would have to be very not sales pitchy, like on purpose, like very much a just, this is a meet to talk about things. And I think there's a ton of value in it anyways, but I think it could then be pivoted a bit at times to go like, one of the things that we've started to move forward with as an initiative is standardizing, the wireless access points that our clients use because we use Ubiquity, blah, 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 whatever it might be. And like, hey, this is something that probably fits into a lot of your businesses. How do you feel about that? This is why we think it's good. And this is why we think it's good to do it for everybody and not just you client and you client. Like if we're all doing the same thing, isn't that good? And aren't we all on the same page for, whatever the myriad of reasons are?
Yeah.
It's kind of like the notion of benchmarking, right? So you can say sort of here our average client has all of these services. You can hand out individual sheets like you're number 1 on the list, you're number 17 on the list, right? So you've got a ranked list of clients and say like, this is where you fall in best practices. Businesses are competitive. Alex says it all the time. You're a CEO because you're a competitor, right? And you kind of want to win. So when you show them, and Matt, I think you brought up that benchmarking last week, right? We did a couple of weeks ago, if we could benchmark somehow and see how we're doing in comparison to others, that's a good pushing point for folks too.
Yeah, for sure.
So I'm wondering your thoughts on the clients that are engaged with you that you can only justify meeting with once a year. And in that meeting, historically, if it was a bigger client and you're meeting them quarterly, you're pulling up their LCI budget and assessment. What's your thoughts of doing that in a group? And how would you do that? Each person, they have their own account, they log in themselves. You've got a sterilized account and you're walking people through it, answering questions maybe.
So if I'm having handed out math tests to 30 different students who were not allowed to know what the other students did and walk through the answer key, right? So the ideal answer is this and why definitely can be done, right? So to give everybody their own individual book and then walk through, I think your idea of an ideal, right? A genericized. As a matter of fact, somebody did that the other day. I shared our Galactic Advisors, right? Our Star Wars demo site data, and they loaded a fake client into their website so they could speak about it. But there's certainly ways to say, okay, we're looking at asset lifecycle. You have yours in front of you. What's it look like? Here's your budget. This is what we're prioritizing. I think there are definitely ways to do that in a group. Again, structuring that conversation is really important to give think time so that they can look at it, digest what you're saying. So you can't do like, okay, I've got a PowerPoint slide deck. We're going to talk about all these things and then go. You need to give them time to, all right, go to page 7. We're all going to look at your prioritized assessment items, right? We're going to go through our answer key and then I want you to look at yours and think about what's a priority for you. And I would have some takeaway call to action for them to respond to that so that you can get the feedback, right? Do a Google form and say, all right, pull up your computer, or have an exit ticket. What I learned today was, and what I want to talk to Matt about next is, so that because that's part of it too. You don't want them to walk away with all these things they need, and then you have to go have the meeting with them to chase down what it is. Let them, of the things we've recommended, circle, I'm doing these two, hand that back, and then you've already got your sale kind of in the bag.
And even, something that a couple of other vendors did better than us last week that I kind of took away from some webinars we did. They had, they came to us after we did a joint webinar with them and said, hey, here's some people who checked the yes on a box and they would like to schedule a meeting with you to address some things, right? So these are people who now are ready to meet with you because they've been in the room and talked about it. So give them a, hey, if we're at the end of this and you see that you need to do something, here's a website link you can go to, schedule a call, get on my calendar, get on my bookings, whatever, and schedule a time to talk about it. But if you think about those smaller customers, their budgets aren't going to be the big scary thing, right? It's the risk assessment, the cyber insurance questionnaire that's going to be the big scary thing, because they have 4 assets. 7 if you count the firewall, the switch, and the wireless access point, right? They just don't own that much. So even if it all goes up in 1 year, it's one bad year and that's it. But you can talk to them about, if it looks like it's all going up in 1 year, then maybe we need to buy some stuff early, hang on to something a year too long, and move some things around so that we can start to flatten out that budget. You can have that conversation. But I'm with Marnie on that. I think you absolutely need to give them the one that has their answer on it so they can look at it and see, and you'll see them looking around the room going, who's nodding their head like they've got this one together, and who's sitting over here hanging their head like I am over my red answer.
Well, and the other piece is tier it, right? My traditionally C students were not getting the same advice that my straight A students were getting, right? So if your risk assessment is not giving you a score that makes you happy, right? It's almost like the level 1, level 2, level 3 that Alex talked about last week. You have to give them the next thing, right? They're not going to go from being a straight C student to a straight A student immediately. You need to help them with the nice bite-sized chunk. What I see a commonality of folks that scored a 50% here. Can we MFA already? Right? Like, or have a theme for your levels.
Yeah.
So as you're talking through and I'm digesting it, I'm getting excited by the idea of trying to do that with the assessments, getting a group of companies, giving them a login beforehand, saying we're going to go through this assessment together. We'll walk through it, explain each question so you know what you're answering. But then at the end of that is, I'm going to ask again, because I'm all excited about the idea of they get to the end of it. And if there's 10 different companies on there, they see their score compared to everybody else who just took it, and where they're in line or behind everybody else would be a very unique experience. But it sounds cool in my head. I don't know in practice.
It's interesting. I mean, you will get responses from it. Think about any time you've had to go look at a list and find out your ranking, right? Like, get benchmarked. You're number 3 on that list.
And the content in LCI is designed for you and your account manager to use it. If you're going to go have them log in and do it, you might move it to a Google form or a Microsoft form or something like that, because then you can share anonymous responses. Right? You can get the feedback. You can show the pie chart and say, in this room, 17 people answered it the right way, 12 people answered it the wrong way. Look to your left and look to your right. One of those people screwed it up. So you're not alone, but we all have work to do, right? We all have improvement to make or whatever. It may be that we can feed you some of the content, but we're not the right delivery mechanism for it.
Are you suggesting not giving an account to our users to fill out an assessment?
I think your existing customers, if you're doing it just for existing clients, you probably can even run through the assessment for them faster than they can do it. Right? If you have tools deployed and they're just a little teeny tiny client, I think those clients well enough that you can run through it in 15 minutes.
I'm thinking though that the cost then is going through and convincing them of the issues they've got, which you end up then having to go through and explain it all anyways.
Yeah.
That if you had them fill it out on their own, and if they don't feel comfortable, that we've got this group webinar you can jump on and we're going to walk through it together and answer what each question means as a group. They get more invested in it is what I'm thinking. And then when you're saying, well, here's what it costs to fix that problem, they might feel different about it.
I don't know what I don't know, and you might want to try it both ways. I mean, I don't have the reason we wanted to talk about this was because I feel like there's a real problem in those very small businesses,
Yeah.
and I don't know how to solve it.
Yeah.
And I actually got pretty at odds with Ray Orsini over it. I mean, he and I had a little bit of a knockdown, and he and I usually agree on almost everything. Like we're cut from the same cloth a lot of the time. And to the point where he's like, come talk on my radio show with me about it. Like, I want to have this conversation, because if you and I disagree, a lot of people are on both sides of this. So I don't know the answer, but I feel like it's something that deserves a conversation.
So I was
You could go straight to Google Forms. Why wouldn't LCI give us the ability to show the same reports you already give us, but with the usernames?
Well, mostly because we thought of this last week.
Okay.
So
It's like you already have
You had a
the
whole
item
7
detail.
days.
So we're all gonna be the beta testers.
So I just stole Alex's screen for a minute, but my thinking is, once you get this report, you mask, right? You would screenshot this and mask the names and then tell them which column they are, right? So then to be able to see that, I feel like that's compelling, right? I'm feeling pretty good if I'm Hogwarts. I don't have any, and some of these are more telling. But my thinking was, first, ask questions that they can respond to if you're having them do it, right? So we're not talking about this one, right? Because they're like, I don't know if I have half of those things. But if you put it truly in their language, and in this one, we just did that customer health one that we had done at the beginning of COVID. But I think if you ask things in, like, I pay on time, or my client, if you're saying to them, do your customers pay on time, and you don't spend time chasing them for payments, they can answer that easily. Then you're really drilling in. And if you get a whole row of red, guess what you're selling tomorrow, right? I think that's very interesting. But again, hide the names.
Yeah.
Please hide the names.
The next tab is even, I think, more,
Yeah.
because it turns into a graph. It's a lot easier just to look at it and see.
Yep. And by category, right?
As much as I'd like to be able to answer those universally, to say you're one customer compared to the clients of 700 customers, 700 MSPs in Lifecycle Insights, to give you that bigger view. Problem is, our questions are so customizable, we can't rank things across that many customers, but we can certainly do it across the same assessment within your client base. That has potential.
Yeah, Alex, I was even thinking, going through the assessment that we would run for a workshop, we'll have already run for 20 clients
20
that month
customers, yeah.
also anyways. And I could just show that as a comparison.
Yeah. Of what healthy looks like, right? This is
Yeah.
when you come.
Or just, this is my average client right now. Here's
Yep.
where you are.
Yep.
There would be, I think, more value long term if we could show per question answers that way, just because 18 of 20 people have MFA turned on, and I'm the last jerk that won't turn it on, or we're one of the last two
Yeah,
jerks that won't
that
turn
is
it on.
that is where this one is more powerful.
Because I'm
right?
inconvenienced, right?
Yeah.
And so a roll up of this
Yep.
with just totals at the tops of the columns or something might have some power.
But I do agree that this is pretty powerful to see where. So we would give school systems this when I worked in ed tech, and the red ones knew that they had work to do, right? And they set their benchmark on what they were going to do next. And in the category performance, it's just not hard. Like, okay, we're doing well in these categories, but some of them we've got struggles.
Yeah. So to Greg's point, you'll find out next week why you don't have this week, because next week we're going to be back to talk about new features, bells and whistles, and cool stuff in the platform.
Yeah.
So our devs have not been sleeping. No, literally, they never sleep. But they do have some new stuff coming that we'll be sharing with you next week. I hope this was a good, worthwhile conversation for everybody. I don't know that we solved anything or answered anything, but so definitely some good ideas out there. If somebody has an idea that you're going to go try, and you think that there's something that we can participate in or provide some value to, feel free to reach out. Even if you just want to go do it and come back and tell me how you did and whether it was successful or not, I would love to hear somebody say, we're figuring this out, we're getting there, we've made some traction. Because I think it's a real problem. And I got into IT because I liked solving people's problems. And then I look at the industry as a whole going, if you don't spend $1,500 a month, I can't help you, please go away. And I just feel like the more compliance rolls downhill, the more the mom and as regulation gets poked at MSPs, you guys won't be able to help small businesses if we don't find a way to do something for these little guys. And it shouldn't be a charity. You guys have to make money. You're here to get paid. As hard as you work, you should get paid well. So we got to find a way to do that and do it profitably. So I think it's a cool problem to solve if we can figure it out. I appreciate everybody's participation today. It was useful to me, and I think we learned some things that maybe we can take back and make some future feature requests with.
Always. Thanks all. Have good weekends.
Thanks, everybody. Enjoy your long weekend. Hopefully it's uneventful.
Appreciate it, everybody.